I think you're a real man for this moment. Can you give us just a quick glimpse into your background and kind of the diversity of thinking that brought you to how you're approaching this problem today?
Yeah, Chris, thank you. I'm excited to be here and see many familiar faces, so thank you. Yeah, my journey is an interesting one. You know, as you mentioned, I got my PhD in chemical engineering, and by the way, I did use neural networks to make sense out of my data. So what is old is new again, I think, as I say. Spent 10 years in consulting at McKinsey, and then came to Dell for the first time, left and became an investor at TPG Capital in a venture capital firm, and returned back to Dell 4 years ago to bring all of the cumulative experience, including my serving on 10 different boards, to this role, which I took on a year ago. And you're exactly right. I think we are at this really exciting moment. So I'm tremendously excited about its opportunities that it presents for all of us.
I want to talk a minute about Dell. I know growing up, Dell was kind of the prominent brand for me. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with my mom, figuring out what components we would put in the new desktop build. But Dell has been on a long AI journey as well. Can you walk us through that journey, both in terms of how your customer and client offerings have developed and how you have kind of adapted as the technology has improved over the years?
Yeah, Chris, so we've been playing with AI for a long time. A lot of our products have had several traditional AI elements in them for a while. With the advent of Gen AI and the opportunity that it presents for itself, we kind of went back and thought about how it applies to us, and we think about ourselves as customer zero. And we came up with a simple strategic framework. We think about AI in 4 different categories: AI in our products, AI for ourselves, how do we apply it to ourselves, and then AI on and AI with. So what do our customers do with AI on our products? So we think about it in those 4 simple ways. As far as AI for is concerned, which is applying it to ourselves, we kind of went back and thought about it at a very fundamental level and a very different level to think about what does AI enable. And we went back and anchored ourselves to our AI strategy has to be reflection and accentuation of our business strategy. And that's the first and foremost principle we anchored to. And we are rethinking how we use it for ourselves quite dramatically. I'll touch upon that, but by and large, when you go back and look at our business strategy, it is anchored to our unique operating model, which is driven by an end-to-end portfolio covering services, servers, storage, networking, data protection, software, and PCs, the broadest portfolio in the world, largest go-to-market engine in the industry with tens of thousands of direct sellers and 250,000 partners, services capabilities globally across 180 countries with 2,200 service centers, and then our supply chain, where we buy a tremendous amount of parts all over the world. Our AI strategy is anchored towards accentuating that and helping our customers win. And that's where the AI on and the AI with, when we think about ourselves as customer zero, it gives us a unique ability to go and tell our customers precisely what to do because we embarked on this journey pretty early.
Do you think that, I love that concept of customer zero, of applying what you're recommending to yourself first and learning from that. You know, here we're talking about how to accelerate this innovation cycle. I mean, literally how to build momentum as companies adapt and evolve. How valuable do you think that customer zero mindset has been for you in kind of generating the momentum of that innovation flywheel?
Tremendously valuable. And this is not a new principle either, because we have always thought about ourselves as customer zero. We're a scale company with over 100,000 people. And really, it's really all of that thinking that drove us to be one of the first in the industries to define a chief AI officer role, which we still have. We thought about using Gen AI very differently to drive a lot of the innovation for ourselves. We thought about the architecture platform we need to put in place. We thought about data and data pipelining that needs to be in place to take advantage of that. We thought about, as our customers implement it and we do, what implication does it have for people and the skilling needs? What governance do we need to set up? So there's a lot of different elements that we've thought through, and being a customer zero and taking that mindset, hugely important.
Is there, was there ever a moment, an event that caused you to rethink the strategy that you were executing, or maybe question assumptions that you had gone in with? Like, how frequently are you pivoting or adjusting as you learn more through experimentation?
Look, we have this culture of curiosity and ongoing innovation, and focused on that. Largely driven by Michael, who founded the company 40 years ago, and Jeff Clark, who's been in the company for 37 years. So we are continually evaluating. But I'll tell you, I think as we looked at the pace at which this is coming about, that has caused us to think quite purposely about the pace at which we need to go about implementing things, and what is the systematic way of implementing Gen AI across our businesses. So for example, back in October, we went out to the street and at our security analyst meeting and talked about the big trends. At that time, the AI hardware and services market was estimated to be $124 billion by 2027. Last year, 10 trillion tokens per generated. They were expected to go to about a quadrillion by 2028. 3 months later, the numbers had moved. The expected market was $154 billion, 1.5 quadrillion from a quadrillion. So we began to realize this is moving at a very, very dramatic pace. So we need to think about increasing the nimbleness with which we attack this and go at it. So that was one big thing. Number two, we began to realize that a lot of customers were coming to us and asking about where do they get started? How should they start? So that caused us to rethink about our portfolio. For example, in our services portfolio, that caused us to accentuate the offerings related to day zero, day one, and day two. So day zero, we work with customers to define which particular use cases they should prioritize. We went through a very systematic process. We had 800 different use cases underway in the company. We got very thoughtful about how do we prioritize and implement them. So we're bringing that learning from a customer zero mindset to our customers on their day zero. Similarly, in day one, what do you do about the data and data pipelining, and how do you deploy it? And oh, by the way, do you deploy it into the data center, or are you better off running some of these models on PCs? Because frankly, for a lot of these models, they're perfectly good, especially in a world where 83% of the data sits outside of the cloud and 50% is generated on the edge. So those are the types of thinking that we have implemented and changed our strategy and approach around.
We talk about data governance and warehousing and deployment, but I think a huge, when I talk to chief AI officers and CAOs, a huge portion of their time and energy today is spent on enablement and skill development, even beyond the tech organization, like enterprise-wide. You mentioned Dell has more than 100,000 employees. How have you guys approached that, that skill development for non-technical employees and kind of deployed or build some facility in the workforce with these Gen AI technologies that many of us are toying with, whether we're allowed to today or not?
Yeah, we've taken a very purposeful and programmatic approach to it, Chris. Step one is about making sure our entire population understands the fundamentals of AI. So we have implemented 4 different modules across the whole company to make sure that everybody has versatility with what the fundamentals are. Step 2 is developing what we call 101, 201, 301 level knowledge for our employees based on the domains that they will be applying AI to. And then step 3, linked to that, is generating excitement amongst our team members. Our culture is so forward-leaning and innovative that what we found is there was a huge hunger for team members to learn about it on their own. And what we have done is we have prioritized 4 use cases. As we have demonstrated impact, we have found a way, and the team members have found a way to share it. But bottom line is we are being very thoughtful about upskilling of the talent in the organization.
I love that, the essential nature of just building an excitement and fun into the evolution and discovery process today.
Absolutely.
I see so many people going through that, including myself many times. Keeping on the practical front, do you have any real tangible advice for chief strategy officers, CEOs, COOs, anyone thinking about and tasked with developing a strategy for AI deployments and accelerating innovation in a way that aligns with the core business strategy and operating model that a company is already executing? What would you tell them to think about?
I think, Chris, our experience on this, and we started pretty early on this journey, is that there are a few fundamental steps. And there's almost an algorithm you could follow that takes some of the scariness out of the equation and gets to impact. Number one, be very clear about what your business strategy is and what an AI strategy is that mirrors that. Number two, pick an approach. There are some companies who follow a let 1,000 flowers bloom approach, which I don't think is the right approach. Pick an approach to prioritize the use cases where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck and accentuate your strategy. Number three, set up the right tone at the top and make sure that you have the governance model in place to actually go about and systematically implementing these approaches. Number four, make sure that you build the employee skill set and build excitement around them. And number five, have the operational rhythm and drumbeat to systematically go and implement some of these things. And no, by the way, remain nimble, because there are so many new areas that are coming up all the time and new tech tools coming in all the time that make sure you can incorporate them into your workflow and how you're going to implement Gen AI.
You just, I think, wrote a great roadmap for so many of us. The other critical stakeholder, I think, at the table increasingly are company boards and directors, right? I think a lot of directors that we're working with and board advisors as well are working through what does a director need to be thinking about today, what are the questions they need to be asking, where do they need to focus their sometimes limited attention and energy right now to get the most bang for the buck, as you mentioned. If I were a board director, what would you tell me I need to be focusing on over the next 3, 6, 9 months?
Yeah, Chris, I've been a board director across over 10 different public and private boards. And as I think about the responsibility of a board, in my view, this is a really critical area for the boards to focus on. So first, I think the boards should educate themselves on the fundamentals as well as the direction in which the technology is going. And it's moving so fast, including things like agents and multi-agent systems that are coming through, which have big implications. And number two, I think the boards should be holding the management teams accountable for sharing both the risks and the opportunities, and frankly, having their own independent perspective on those as well during this time period. Because this is moving so fast, and there are so many adjacent areas through which different risks and opportunities arise for a company, that I think it's an important topic for a board-level discussion.
I think just having the discussion.
Absolutely.
The first step that so many folks are looking for. I'm curious, we're talking a lot about deployment and scaling and accelerating innovation cycles. But do you or your team use AI or Gen AI in your own strategic planning process? Is it a brainstorm partner? How are you guys using it?
I think saying no would be a bad answer to that question. I think I would destroy my credibility instantaneously. No, all kidding aside, absolutely. So, okay, what do we do?
And an example.
Yeah,
practical.
I'll give you an example. So we've been using Gen AI tools. Well, first, we've been using Gen AI tools to just look at the landscape. So we are monitoring changes across 15 different dimensions from a strategic planning perspective, and we're using Gen AI tools and classical AI tools to look at the landscape and figure out which are the most important signals for us to watch for so we can take it into a strategic planning process. Number two, we have actually created a daily pulse using some of these tools that we disseminate to the decision makers in the company so we can all stay on top of those. And number three, we're beginning to, my team is beginning to lead into running some of the proof of concepts using various of the new tools, including multi-agent systems, to think through how do we do strategic planning better within the company. So those are some of the ways we have incorporated it into our strategic planning process, Chris.
You mentioned as part of that using the technology to help you identify signals that might be meaningful or important to your decision-making process or kind of the strategic direction moving forward. I'm curious if, I think one of the things we're all wrestling with is just how rapid the pace of innovation in this field is, how quickly new capabilities are emerging. So thinking about those signals, what are some areas that Dell is watching closely that you think helps inform you with regards to where this technology is headed over the next year or two?
So a few things we are watching for very closely. Some of the initial deployments a lot of the initial deployments are being driven by CSPs and tier 2 CSPs aimed at training. But as we look at the migration, by the end of the decade, 90% of the compute will be towards inferencing. And inferencing is going to be driven by enterprises, and a lot of that is going to be driven by data, as we have talked about. And since the vast majority of the data sits on premises, and so how does that play out? So we've been watching, 83% of the CIOs are talking about repatriating the data to on-prem. How does that drive inferencing? We are watching very closely the number of customers who are coming back and moving from POCs to buying more of our portfolio for inferencing areas. We're watching that very closely because that's a leading indicator for how rapidly we think this is going to go. And frankly, it is accelerating quite significantly.
I want to go to one of these questions from the audience. You know, we've been talking about creating that flywheel of innovation, accelerating, building momentum. One of the things that can wreck or throw sand in the gears of that flywheel is failure, something not working out, an investment not materializing with ROI. You know, there's certainly the risk of failure as you approach deployment and scaling. What would you say to everyone in the room here as they continue to focus on the pilots and deployments and bringing these things to life and delivering strategic value for their firms? How should they think about failure as part of that, as part of the innovation cycle?
It's hugely important. And I think the company culture is the key part of embracing failure. We've tried things and they haven't worked, but our culture is such that rather than dwelling on the failure, we are much more focused on, okay, what did we learn from it? And therefore, what do we do differently going forward? It's easier said than done, but that's a huge important element of that. And for this kind of a technology, we are bound to have early failures, but you got to focus on learning.
Well, I wish you many more successes than failures in the future. Thank you so much for this fascinating and very practical conversation, Vivek.
All right, thanks a lot, Chris.